Hey, thanks for joining me for this episode of Audio Post-Production 101. Today we're going to be talking about Foley. And just to recap, we've gone through a quick dialogue edit. We've cut our background, hard effects, and sound design, which include the sound effects. And we're not going to work on music. That's a composer's job. But the kind of final editing task we need to talk about is Foley. And what is Foley? Well, it's everyday or realistic sounds recorded in sync with picture. Basically, these are sounds that, they're usually not as big and grand as sound effects that are recorded in sync with what's going on screen. So, cloth movements, hand pats, footsteps are kind of the cliched, everybody knows about footsteps on Foley, but even props like cigarettes, or for like a fight scene, you might do some sweeteners with cloth movement and hand grabs and stuff like that. So it's really every little minor detailed sound that could possibly be recorded, to include things like a necklace moving when somebody turns their head. Now, on a lot of independent films or low budget films, really low budget films, micro budget, they don't always have the budget for Foley. And so it's often the first thing to get axed is they say, well, we'll do a dialogue edit, we'll do a sound effects edit, and we just don't have the money for Foley because it's expensive. You're paying a person to cue the Foley, to then record and perform the Foley, which is 2 different people, sometimes 3, and then you have somebody edit the Foley, and that can take a couple weeks to do all that stuff. So it does get really expensive to have it done professionally, and there's some things you can do that we'll talk about to kind of do it yourself if there's not a budget for Foley. But paying a professional to do it, or learning how to do it yourself, and doing it on a professional level with a good room, good props, the right surfaces, the right shoes, adds so much to a film. And when it's done right, you don't notice it until you take it away. Once you mute it, it's like, oh man, all that realistic texture is just gone. So it is, I'd say, necessary for like a professional end product, for a professional mix, to have Foley done. But it is sadly one of the first things to go when you're dealing with super tiny budgets. Okay, so we've got our session here with all the tracks that we've cut. We've got dialogue, our temp ADR, our FUTS tracks, our PFX, our A, B, C, and D sound effects, and then A and B backgrounds. Now, on this dialogue edit, I didn't checkerboard the scenes just because I wanted to keep my track count pretty low, so I could take this on my laptop if I wanted. So that's why I don't have that set up there. Plus, I'm the mixer, so I can kind of do what I want. You should always keep the mix in mind when you're cutting stuff. And I just wanted to show why Foley tends to be kind of the redheaded stepchild on these tiny budget features. Dialogue is super important. I don't have music on here, so this is just like a scene without any music. So the different groups of sounds and their level in the mix, and I guess their importance, is just these squiggly lines here. The red is dialogue, the blue would be sound effects, the green is background ambience, and then this like pinky purple color is the Foley. So the Foley fills in this layer between the background ambience and the dialogue, and it's constant. Like, even on subtle scenes where people are sitting and just talking, there's going to be cloth movements and hand and different surfaces that they're on, which ends up adding a lot. And to me, it's like the glue that connects the dialogue and the background ambience together. And when you put everything all together, it just sounds great. It sounds real. It sounds like a movie. On a lot of projects, especially what I would call talkies, which are like the indie mumblecore, 3 people talking about how sad they are, it doesn't add as much to the story as a good dialogue edit, or proper background ambience, or the right sound effects, or especially the music. So that's the reason that it tends to get thrown out. I always push for a Foley budget, even if it's not a huge budget. Maybe you don't cover 100%. You just cover the important sounds that you cue, which is the first thing we'll be going over back in Pro Tools. Like I said from the first episode, my goal with this course is to take you from a blank session to a completed mix. So most of the time when you're cueing Foley, you will make a new session, blank session, and just cue based off of what's in the guide track, whether that's the guide track from the picture editor or the guide track from the dialog editor with everything kind of, cleaned up and whatever PFX they were able to save. You just cue it off that with a blank session. But since I want to go from a blank session to a completed mix, I'll just use this session, and I guess I'll put my new tracks down here. Well, first what I'm going to do, let me hide all these. I don't necessarily need to see those. So when you're cueing Foley, I'm just going to make about 24 tracks. Actually, let me do 24 footstep tracks, and then I'll do 24 prop. And that should pretty much, and then I'll do maybe 2 hand. When you're cueing Foley, you want to make it efficient for the Foley team, meaning the recordist / mixer and the Foley artist, or walker, as they're commonly called. You want to make it efficient for them to get through the entire show. On an indie film, they might only have like 5 days to record the Foley. So having, for example, the footstep tracks labeled by character, shoe, and surface makes it to where they can go through the entire film and record all of the footsteps for Alec. They are dress shoes on wood. And you could even break this out into different kinds of wood. Maybe it's, rattly wood or tight wood or wood with a rug on it. But I'm going to name this footstep Alec dress shoes wood. Next, I'll do footstep Alec. Let's say he's got boots on gravel. And I'll go down the line of every single surface that I've seen on this film, every single shoe that I've seen, or I can infer based on their outfit, so that all these footstep tracks will end up being named character, shoe, and surface type. So that is what you do to name these. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I didn't do it. I've hired a Foley team for this. They did it, and they did a great job. So I'll just show you how I would cue this. So we've just pretend we've got all our tracks set up for footsteps. And I would do the same for props. This prop might be prop paper, and this prop might be pistol, and this one might be rifle, and this one might be paper money. We'll do paper money. And you'd go through and do the same thing with this, which will give you a ton of tracks. You might end up with like 100 Foley cue tracks. And check with the Foley team or supervising sound editor if there is one, because they might have a different way. I just like things to be, one track per kind of recording setup. That way, once I cue this, for example, right here I've got a foot coming into frame. So I'm going to cue this for footsteps. So I started on the frame where I want them to start recording, and I'll keep going over, bam, right there. So he stops there, so this would be a good take, and it's about 17 seconds long. So I'm gonna go Option Command G, and it says Alec Boots Gravel because I have that as gravel. This should really be cement. So I could just rename this for now. Okay, so we've got one region group there. There's some gunfire here. And then he starts walking again. I'm going to start this slightly off camera, and then he stops right there. Now here, we've got I think he kicks the door here. So we'll want to lift there. And maybe a foot down, although it's not going to really be that important because we want that door opening to be really loud. And then is there any more for this? Maybe he walks away. We'll say right there. So we've also got, let me bring up, I think I had a pistol track here. I should really color code these so that I don't get disorganized. Okay. We got a pistol here, and we might not want to hear it when he's walking. It might spoil the surprise to have that Hollywood gun handling sound, but I want it there. Bam. Okay, so we've got pistol, and now let me bring another prop track up, and we're gonna do Rubik's. Did I spell that right? It's probably a C, right? Rubik's Cube. I'm gonna add like 3 X's to that. Okay. Okay, we've got some Rubik's Cube action here. I could go through and separate the region groups based on whether it's on screen or off screen. That would probably make the Foley team really happy, but I'm gonna piss them off, and I'm just gonna say Rubik's Cube. Oh, he is reading something. Look at that. So let's use this. I think I have this set for paper. No, we're gonna call this Nudie Mag, or we could just call it Magazine. Probably want some off-screen stuff for that too. I think for his I will separate it out. We don't really see it there. They could probably get that in one take. And then tab over. Sometimes the Foley team likes to just roll through this stuff and try to get it in one take. And the really good Foley artists can do that. And then others like it to be in short little pieces so they can not have to go back and pick a bunch of stuff up. And I would also cue maybe his head hitting that. We'll call this would hit. This is why you end up with so many tracks, because it's just a lot of little things. Okay, he looks down and then it comes back to him. Put it around there. Really subtle one. This one is another would hit here. So I'm just paging over. Now you'll notice I'm not cueing the door hits where he kicks the door open, because I've cut that on sound effects. And that's one nice thing. If you can work with the sound effects editor, or you are the sound effects editor, you can leave stuff out, because you know, like, hey, I covered the door, you know, you guys don't have to record anything for that. It sounds fine. So there's a lot of things I'm probably missing on this scene. I haven't cued cloth. There's other little props. I could probably cue the toilet paper rolls if I wanted to, but I didn't want you guys watching me cue in Foley for an hour. I just wanted to quickly go over using region groups, which is Option Command G, using the different tracks for the different character, shoe, and surface, and then one track for each prop. That way, when the Foley team or you has to record it, it's efficient. There's not a bunch of time spent changing surfaces, changing shoes, finding props. It can all be done, you know, just track by track, go through the whole film and get it done, you know, in a reasonable amount of time, because time is money. So what do you do if there's no budget for Foley? Well, what you're going to have to do is go through the production recordings and try to get as much as you can out of those. Footsteps, props, go to alternate takes, just like you would with a dialogue edit. Try to find the material you need in the tracks that were recorded on set with the actors, with the real props. Because even though it's a pain in the ass, it'll be the right sound, and it'll be the sound from the movie and the sound from the field recordist, and the mics will match, and it just sounds better. It just matches. If you can't find certain sounds, or they shot MOS, then you have to kind of do ghetto Foley and record it yourself. So you'll need a microphone, you'll need some kind of preamp or field recorder, and ideally you'll have a way to play back picture. so that you can perform it in sync. I usually just do that stuff in my studio. It's quiet enough. I've got everything set up. I've got my mic handy. The issue is finding all the props and then footsteps. Footsteps are so hard to get right in a small room, and the surfaces have to be built in like a very specific way to not get resonances from the actual pits, the boxes themselves. But take mics out into the world, find a house that has the right sound, go outside. Don't be afraid to take field trips to get the sounds you need on location. And ideally, find a way to play back either from a laptop or even a phone. You can do a Litzy embedded time code on a video and sync that up with a recorder. So there's all kinds of options for kind of DIY Foley. The other thing you can do is these are not like great fixes, but there are some instruments that work in Kontakt, for example, that you can use for Foley on a limited scale. One of them is Edward Ultimate Suite, and they have a cloth and props, and they have a shoes. I've got one of the expansion packs, so this is cool because you can play the on a MIDI keyboard, the different sounds. You can fade between them with a MIDI controller. You can change the surfaces. You can change the shoes. I've had to use this on rescue projects where they didn't do any Foley and the M&E failed, and it didn't have to sound great. It didn't have to sound like a real Foley artist. They just needed coverage for it, and it works great for that. There's not a lot of variety, and the performances are just what the samples are, so it's not the same human touch as hiring a Foley team or doing it yourself even. So this is, to me, like a last resort. No money for it, has to be done pretty quick, and it doesn't have to sound great option. It's always better to record your own stuff. So I guess what I'm trying to say is don't do that if you don't have to. Other stuff like hands and props are pretty easy to record in just a quiet room. And a lot of times you don't have to have full coverage. If the film has foreign distribution, you pretty much have to do Foley just because there's no way the M&E will be fully filled without it. So that's another thing to bring the producers, like, hey, do you guys want this film to be shown in China, in Russia, in France? You got to pay for Foley. Sorry, it sucks, but call a rich friend, get your grandpa to pitch in, do whatever it takes to get it done right. So because showing is better than telling, I figured I'd just show you how to record some quick DIY Foley and how to cue it and set it up to where you can get it in sync pretty quickly. So I've got a hand clap here that I need to record. And what I'll do is I've got my region group from the lovely Foley cueing that I did. I'm going to make a beep track real quick. And you'll do the same thing for ADR, where you're going to want to have some sync beeps so that you can get into rhythm. So you make a new track, call it beep track, go other signal generator. So 1 kHz at -20, render, there's a beep right there. Now I'm going to select 1 second and do Option Command G. And then I'm just going to take this and duplicate it twice because I like 1, 2, 3, and then you go on 4. Now with this beep, it sounds like this. And so I know, actually, I'm going to move this over right there. So whoever cued this did a terrible job and should be fired immediately because they have it off by a couple frames at the start of the file. So you want the 4th beep to fall right where the sound should go. 2, 3, clap, clap, clap. And the timing is clap, clap, clap. So it's ba, 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 ba. Okay, so now I'm going to record this. I will set my pre-roll. I'm going to hit Command 1 and set my pre-roll to 3 seconds. So pre-roll is on. You can turn it off and on with Command K. And I'm going to set the cursor a little bit before I want to record. Don't need that anymore. And I'm just soloing the beep track. I don't want to hear production. I want to be able to just hear the beeps and go for it. So let's hit record on this. All right, now let's have a listen to that. And what I'll do is just make sure, Okay, see how you can see his fingers get sharp there? It was off by a little bit. And you can also sync it up with the guide track. If you sync it up real tight with the guide track, what's great is the mixer can play both the Foley and the production together, and it's kind of nice. So this one is right there. This one doesn't have anything in production because of the way they cut it. I'm actually going to bring it back one more frame. Bam, right there. This one does. So now let's see if that's in sync. Yeah, that's great. So it's in sync. Sound quality's okay. I could even pretty up my edits a little bit by hitting G and just doing a little fade out. A lot of times with transient sounds, you don't really need to fade them in if you cut it tight enough, but you can if you want. Just a little bit. You don't want to fade into the transient at all. Great. So DIY Foley, not as good as a real Foley artist, but you know, it'll do in a pinch. Luckily for me, this Foley has been cued, recorded, and edited by the people at Post-Red Audio. And they do great Foley. Like, their room just sounds really nice. The performance is always spot on, and the mix, they do a great job at adding some perspective to wide shots and things like that. So if you need Foley and you know you have a little bit of budget for it, I can't recommend them enough. They just do great work. They've already delivered this, and it's edited. It's not a super high track count. There's 4 feet tracks, 6 prop tracks, 2 hand or touch tracks, 1 cloth, two cloth tracks, and 1 leather track. I asked them to put the leather on a separate track. I like the leather split off just because it's easier to have it on a separate track. A lot of bad guys wear leather, and you can bring it up to make them sound a little more menacing. What I'd like to do first is just make the dialogue and production effects inactive so you can hear just the Foley. And let's actually go back to that scene we were looking at so we can hear it with... So this is no production. This is all going to be just Foley and sound effects. I like that they add a little dookie sound here. That's nasty. But it's cool. They if I'll just solo the Foley for you so you can hear without all the super loud backgrounds. They added leather for the shoes. And so you can see you've got the footstep, props, cloth, and the leather split off there. Let's check out, here's a great example of footsteps. It's just 1 track of footsteps. I'm sure they had to edit this together and kind of comp it. But with all the different changes in surfaces and everything. What's great about having the right sound is the mix just is so much easier. There's no monkeying around with, automating the crap out of stuff and transient designing and really hammering stuff into shape. It's already in shape, and you can just focus on the creative aspects of, panning, and is it loud enough, and do we want more reverb, and how does this tell the story versus how do I make this bad stuff sound good? So I think that's great. Maybe I'll just can check this out. Here's an example. One thing with Foley that you'll find is it tends to be too big. It just tends to be a little more exaggerated as far as the size of the sound and the motion. And it makes sense because if you do that, then you can bring the sound down and have it still be pretty present, versus if you record it too delicately, then it just doesn't sound right when everything's all together. But I'll show you what I mean right here. I would not fire that gun if it sounded like that. That's just me though. But they do things like, the gun getting set down. That sounds great. It's a little watch jingle here for his arm going down. And just to show you, this is a very talky scene, but I'll just show you what it sounds like from the top. So now I'll play that same scene with the dialogue, but I'm going to make the Foley inactive.
Oh, Polizio, what are you doing? Forensics has said that this whole thing ended in a bloodbath. Case is closed.
They found red flower bugs in the evidence room. This case is wide open.
I thought that was cornstarch. Hey, this thing feels like it still got shells in it.
Yeah, forensics gonna come pick that up. What the hell are you wearing?
Oh, just trying out some wardrobe, see if it still fits. I'm going on vacation, baby.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Where?
I'm gonna go see my mother.
Where?
Tampa.
Okay, and now with the Foley back in and the dialogue.
This whole thing ended in a bloodbath. Case is closed.
They found red flower bugs in the evidence room. This case is wide open.
I thought that was cornstarch. Hey, this thing feels like it still got shells in it.
Yeah, forensics gonna come pick that up. What the hell are you wearing?
Oh.
So you get the idea. It's adding a lot that isn't picked up by, their mics or the boom mic. Here's a great example of some Foley that was really necessary for the M&E. And M&E we'll cover more when we get into mixing, but the M&E mix is the music and effects mix. And the purpose of the M&E is to make dubbing easier. So this is mostly in English, this film, but if it goes to be distributed in France or Japan or any other part of the world, there's a good chance they're going to want to dub it in their native language. That's one great thing about me showing you what it sounds like with the dialogue muted, is that's how the M&E is going to sound. So when this gets shipped out and it gets sent to China and they start dubbing it, they're not missing any sounds. Because when you mute the dialogue, you're losing all the footsteps. In this scene, they're messing with this box here. We got money. There's a lot that's going on. And that's why you really need Foley for the M&E, because not just creatively to add that texture, but to just technically cover the sounds that get stripped out when you mute the dialogue. So I'll just show you a couple of spots in here. So it sounds a little cartoony with everything being, blasted at Unity. really loud, over the top. But when it's mixed, all that stuff will be made subtle when it needs to be subtle, loud when it needs to be loud, and even muted sometimes when it's not necessary or it's covered in the dialogue and you just want to save it for the M&E. But Foley is really crucial for the storytelling stuff, for the more subtle storytelling stuff, and then also for the M&E. If the film's going to have foreign distribution, Foley is basically required to fulfill the requirement of a fully filled M&E. Now, that's not to say you couldn't painstakingly edit every footstep and record all the props yourself, or cut it from a library, or use one of the Kontakt instruments. You could, but it's going to take you longer, and it's not going to sound as good as having a performance that's done like this character would do, or like these characters would do. There's just an art in there that you can't get by cutting stuff from a library. So my recommendation is, if you can hire it out to professionals who do Foley for a living, they're going to knock it out of the park. The second best would be recording it yourself, finding a way to do some DIY Foley, and then the least desirable option would be cutting from a library or using one of the Kontakt Foley instruments to just fill in some of the gaps. So I think that covers all I want to go over with Foley. We did a little bit of cueing, we recorded some hand claps, I showed you what good Foley sounds like, and we talked about some ways to do it yourself if that's your only option. And I'm really glad I drew this, because the next step is the mix, where we get to combine all of these elements, including the music, and really get a sense for how the finished product is going to sound. So that's going to be the next episode. Make sure you tune in for that, and thanks for watching.